We'll begin this morning with the latest developments in the investigation of the deadly New Year's Day terrorist attack in the great city of New Orleans. Authorities say the attacker most likely acted alone when he drove a pickup truck through a crowd on Bourbon Street early Wednesday morning. At least 14 people died in the attack, and dozens of others were injured. The attacker was then killed in a shootout with police. He's identified as a 42-year-old Army veteran from Texas. According to the FBI, he was inspired by ISIS and claimed to have joined the terrorist group before the summer. Investigators say that before the attack, the man posted a series of 5 videos on Facebook. According to the officials, in the first video, the attacker explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned that news headlines would not focus on what he called the war between the believers and the disbelievers. The FBI also released these images from surveillance footage that appears to show the man walking down the street about an hour before the attack. Another image shows a blue cooler that authorities say contained an explosive device. President Biden addressed the discovery of those devices after a meeting with members of his Homeland Security team in the Situation Room yesterday.
The FBI briefed me that as of now, we have no information that anyone else is involved in the attack. They've established that the attacker was the same person who planted the explosives in those ice coolers in 2 nearby locations in the French Quarter just a few hours before he rammed into the crowd with his vehicle. They assessed he had a remote detonator in his vehicle to set off those 2 ice chests.
Joining us now from New Orleans, outside the University Medical Center Hospital, is NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch. Jesse, good to see you. What's the latest here about the investigation, and what are officials learning about the suspect?
So, Jonathan, let's go back to what the president just said there, that the suspect allegedly planted these IEDs in the French Quarter multiple hours before the ramming attack. And so what that means is that there were explosive devices that had gone undetected around Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve into New Year's Day for quite some time. And I asked officials yesterday if there had been bomb-sniffing dogs that would have been sweeping this area on New Year's Eve. And the governor's response was effectively suggesting that dogs couldn't sniff something like that out on a street that would have so much going on there. So we're not getting full explanation from officials at this point still as to what kind of sweeps would have been done for something potentially like that on Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve. So from an investigative standpoint, that is something that I think still leaves us wanting for answers at this point. We're also learning more about the victims, Jonathan, and I can tell you we're talking about multiple young people whose lives have been cut horribly short. We're talking about 2 18-year-olds, multiple parents, people who were early in their careers, someone who was about to start nursing school, people. And one account that really stuck out with me is hearing of a 25-year-old young man who was about to, who went out on Bourbon Street for New Year's Eve and had dinner with his parents beforehand. So just imagine you have dinner with your child, and then this happens to them. So these are the kinds of accounts we're hearing about, the lives that were lost. And again, all this is happening as Bourbon Street has been reopened, but there's still a lot of outstanding questions. And I got to tell you, Jonathan, I went last night and walked around Bourbon Street in the late evening hours to get a sense of what it was like on the first night reopened. There were hundreds of people out there. There were certainly plenty of visible law enforcement personnel, including military police in camouflage. But I also have to tell you, Jonathan, it appears that that street is still vulnerable because as I was walking down Bourbon Street last night and I looked through the intersections, I saw at multiple points side streets that did not appear to be heavily fortified. And here's what I mean by that. I was able to walk from Bourbon Street down one of the intersecting side streets, and I noticed a police car parallel parked along the curb, so not blocking the middle of the street, and there was metal barricading, the kind of thing you would see at a parade. Nothing that appeared to be heavy or refortified, and that was all I saw between traffic moving down a side street and access to Bourbon Street. So to be clear, after Bourbon Street has been reopened, after officials have made a show showing us heavy vehicles, I have still been able to see what appears to be traffic driving right by a side street that is not fortified by much beyond a metal gate. And of course, authorities may have deployed something that we cannot see. We have asked police about this. We asked them about this overnight. They have not gotten back to us with any kind of explanation. But I can tell you, Jonathan, having been out there again, I saw multiple vehicles, including a taxi. So certainly not law enforcement vehicles in all instances, driving right by what appeared to be an easy access point onto Bourbon Street, and leaves open the possibility that a vehicle could potentially do this again. And that is the scenario after they've reopened the street. And we continue to ask for a lot of different answers from authorities on how this could have happened and what is being done to prevent something like this again. Of course, they had that football game overnight here. Thankfully, that appears to have gone off smoothly by all accounts. I haven't heard anything, and I was there for some of that game, didn't see anything, definitely saw a heavy law enforcement presence. But of course, the bigger picture around all of this moving forward, top of mind, the victims, the families who are grieving right now, but top of mind from a security standpoint moving forward, the Super Bowl is here in about a month, and there are a lot of questions about the city's ability to handle that. Jonathan.
Now, you're right to highlight the possible vulnerabilities with such a major event on the horizon, one of the biggest our nation holds every year. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch, live from New Orleans. Thank you, Jesse.